Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to my YouTube channel, The History Squad. Now today's video is number 9 in our 100 Years War series, but in fact what I'm doing is I'm going back. This is the Battle of Morlaix, 30th of September 1342. It's more associated with the Civil War, the wars of the Breton Succession. So the wars of the Breton Succession, a civil war lasting 26 years. It all kicked off when John III, Duke of Brittany, died without an heir. But he left behind his half-brother, John de Montfort, and his niece, Joan, Dutchess of Brittany. So let them have their little civil war, except for one problem. Joan, she's married to Charles Blois, who is the nephew of Philip VI of France. Now we have the French. They are an outside influence. This civil war is going to really become something. But John de Montfort is captured, and the fight is taken up by his wife, Jeanne, who is then supported, surprisingly, by Edward III, King of England. Now there's already a small force of English helping the Bretons fight, but they are now reinforced by the Earl of Northampton, Billy, no other than William de Bohun. Now we can get to the Battle of Morlaix. What a fight. Battle of Morlaix, 30th of September 1342. Earl of Northampton is laying siege to the fortified town of Morlaix, but he gets intelligence that there is a large French army under Charles Blois coming his way. He doesn't want to be trapped between Morlaix and the French army. So he doesn't abandon the siege. He leaves some troops behind, and then he comes down the Morlaix to Lanmeur road. It runs through a forest, and he sets his army up on the ridge just in front of the forest. At the centre, he has his men-at-arms and his knights, and on the wings, his bowmen, who seem to extend out into the battlefield. This is the beginning of this English system, using their bowmen on the flanks. But the English position, the English Breton position, don't forget this isn't just English, these are the Breton as well. They've got their baggage train actually in the woods. So there will be arrows and supplies further in the woods. They've also dug ditches in front of their position. Now they've learnt this from the Scots, the canny Scots. Bannockburn, I think it was, when they dug the ditches and the English cavalry, or should I say the Norman cavalry, were defeated. So they've now set a kind of a trap. So what happens next is the French, according to some sources, sending their infantry, mainly local levies. They'll be poorly armed. I understand there were Genoese crossbowmen, but as they come up this steep slope and then come into view, they are literally cut to pieces by the bowmen, and they cannot take this punishment. So they withdraw back from the battlefield, and what happens now is the whole battle pauses just for a moment. So what's happened is there's a break in the battle. Charles Blois and Charles de Charnay, his commander, are having a parley, discussing what should we do next. They now know the bowmen are up there. So what happens is de Charnay leads a full-on cavalry attack. So I'm going to position the pieces and let's see what happens. So the second phase of the battle, it's incredible. I must mention this. The French numbers could have been as high as 15,000 troops. The English, less than 2,000. Now, as de Charnay's charge, his mounted cavalry charge, plunge up the hill, they don't know about the ditches, the trenches, the pits, call them what you like, that have been covered over. And horses go crashing into them. And it must have been horrendous. Legs snapping, screaming horses and men. And then the others piling into the back of them. Meanwhile, the bowmen, really close range, pouring those arrows into these poor beasts. Meanwhile, de Charnay, with approximately 200 of his knights and men-at-arms, punched through the centre of the English men-at-arms. Or were they allowed through? because what happens is most of them are fetched down off their horses by the men-at-arms, and de Charnay himself is actually captured. It must have been slaughter as the arrows are pouring in from either side, and then the men-at-arms wade in. They move forward to finish off anybody who's been knocked off their horses. But there's a problem here. The Earl of Northampton knows that his bowmen are running short of arrows, and the French have a second wave of cavalry ready to charge. What happens next is a brilliant manoeuvre. So the final part of the Battle of Morlaix, and it's a master stroke. The Earl of Northampton, Billy to his mates, knows that his bowmen are running short of arrows. He knows that the French have another division of cavalry, and we're talking thousands here, who could charge up that hill on their horses. They now know where the ditches are, which have been filled in with the dead. So the Earl of Northampton withdraws his force into the woods. His bowmen now are hiding amongst the trees. Inside the woods is his baggage train, his supplies, more arrows. So the French charge, and all they can do is scout around the outside of the forest. They daren't get too close because they'll be fetched down by the arrows of the bowmen. Now, there are different conflicting accounts of what happens now. The French lay siege to the woods. The French went home. Basically, what happens is the main French army leaves. The English army, they can continue their siege of Morlaix, which I understand fails. But 50 French knights, this is French knights, are dead, and 150 of them are captured. We do not know the full casualties of the French army because they didn't count the poor infantry. The English are said to have lost less than 100 men. To me, this is, wow, the Earl of Northampton using his head, using his initiative. And this is repeated over and over again as we go through the 100 Years' War until the final phase, when the French begin to use their initiative. But hey, that's for another day. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little film here and the model. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And remember, if you can, to turn on the notifications button, and then you'll get pre-notice as to what's coming on. Now, just for a couple of my Patreon members, Chase Dixon and Patrick Moran, thank you very much, guys. And to all of you, thanks a million. Bye for now.